I did try doing this somewhere with a nicer backdrop, but you just can't escape the motorbike noises in Vietnam. These are the Feiying PB 4.0 from Qiaodan, which is literally just Jordan in Chinese, but no one's calling them that because lawsuits or something. So now I have to pronounce it Qiaodan in awkward pinyin for the rest of this video. Go logic! These are the second tier carbon plated racing shoe in Qiaodan's lineup, behind the more expensive and beefier stacked Feiying Plaid, which is the brand's flagship racer. I've already racked up 276.5 kilometers in these, to be pedantically precise, mostly using them for speed work, but I've also done one 30-kilometer long run, and I've raced an all-out half marathon time trial in them, where I set my current half marathon PB. I also used them for a recent 5K time trial where I dropped under 19 minutes for only the second time ever. So all in all, I put them through their paces in a pretty good mix of runs, and I can say right off the bat that they go fast good. These weigh 233 grams in my EU size 46, which makes them a whopping 2 grams lighter than the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2. And therefore, I think these are the lightest running shoes I've ever owned to date. According to Qiaodan's marketing, they have a stack height of 34mm in the heel and 27mm in the forefoot. So for those of you who don't maths too good, that leaves a 7mm drop. As for the upper, it's a thin, light, not particularly closely knit mesh material that's very breathable. There's a little bit of padding around the ankle collar and a pretty flimsy heel cup, if you can call it that. Overall, it's a pretty typical race shoe upper. There's not a lot of structure and there's not a lot of padding. What there is a wet dog tongue of a tongue. It's this very flimsy suede sort of material that just kind of flops down into the shoe like a thin leather bookmark. It's probably the worst part of the shoe, but it's not actually noticeable in any way once you've tied the laces, so it's not a problem. The laces themselves are pretty good. The default ones are this kind of, I want to say flange, but that's probably not the right word. Anyway, they're kind of wavy. The shoes also come with a spare pair that you can swap them out for, which are pretty similar to the knobbly laces you get on the Vaporfly. Overall, the fit's good, the lockdown is nice and secure, and the padding feels comfortable for what it is. The outsole on this shoe is a fairly generous cover of QASU, which is a CPU material, or casting polyurethane resin, whatever that is. Basically, it's a kind of plasticky sort of material that tends to be quite often preferred over rubber by Chinese brands on their running shoes. I do find it gives a slightly different underfoot feeling to rubber that I can't accurately describe, but having taken it out in the wet and the dry, I've had zero problems with the grip on this one, at least on the tarmac roads and pavements that I've been running on. In terms of the durability, if that's something that concerns you with outsoles, this one will probably outlast the human race. I've got the best part of 300 kilometers on these shoes and I can find zero wear on the outsole. They genuinely look just like new. On to the important bit. The Feiying PB 4.0 midsole is comprised of a material that Qiaodan calls Q Kung Fu Pro. Now, I've done some searching, and while I'm still not 100% sure what this actually is, I found a good few sources claiming it to be a TP-based or TP-EVA blended material. In terms of how it feels, in hand, it feels and looks a lot like the fuel cell in my New Balance RC Elite V2, which I think is an EVA TPU blend, not the PB material that New Balance switched to in the V4. While underfoot and out on the run, the feeling I get from this one very much falls between the RC Elite and the Vaporfly Next Percent 2 that I retired midway through last year. They have some of that soft, forgiving feeling of the old fuel cell foam, while also a little bit of the polystyrene crunch and pop of Zoom X. To me, it feels like a hybrid between the two shoes I just mentioned in terms of the foam and the overall ride. It's more aggressive and poppy than the RC Elite, while being more forgiving and, dare I say, cruisy underfoot than the Vaporfly. In terms of the stack, it's lower than both, and so it doesn't feel quite as protective as either, but it does also feel a little bit more stable and comfortable than the Vaporfly, especially at slower paces. Certainly, my foot doesn't hang over the side of the midfoot in this one. And so to sum up the ride, it's soft underfoot, but you're not squidging down into the midsole, and you get a quick feeling rebound that makes the shoes feel nice and poppy. They don't feel as bouncy and propulsive as the Vaporfly, but they do feel like they're pushing you forward, and they give plenty of that energy back when you do start to go fast. In terms of use cases, when it comes to training, I've been using it mostly for speed work, and I think that's where it excels the most. It's definitely suited to faster paces, and I think it would make a really fine tempo shoe as well. It's also comfortable and cushioned enough to take out for long runs, and I found it very pleasant for ticking along at those steadier paces. In terms of racing, I think you could really do it all in this. It is not a max stack shoe, and that might put you off taking it up to the full marathon distance, although based on my 30k long run, I feel like it would be fine for that too. I guess it all depends on how much cushioning you feel you need. It's definitely light, fast, and lively enough to be a great 5 and 10k racer, and it's comfortable enough to handle half marathons with ease. As I said, I set my half marathon PB in it, so I really can't fault it there. The obvious comparisons for me, like I said earlier, are the RC Elite and the Vaporfly, V2 and V2 respectively, as the Feiying 4.0 PB feels a lot like a love child of those two shoes. Whereas the extra stack and softness of the RC Elite meant I chose it as my marathon shoe for last year's High Form Marathon, a choice I would 100% make again, the slightly more aggressive feel and more pronounced pop and feedback from each step mean I chose this for my half marathon and 5k time trials later in the year. I'd rate those two shoes as about equal, to be honest, with the RC Elite pulling ahead over longer distances, both at pace and going steady, and the Qiaodan Feiying PB winning out the shorter you go. I'd say the tipping point for me is probably somewhere between 10k and 21.1. Comparing it to the Vaporfly, well, I'm going with the Vaporfly over every distance. That shoe is just magic, and it only really falls down for me with the fit and comfort over a full marathon, which is also where the Feiying starts to fall off a bit for cushioning. What I would say is that the Feiying PB feels quite a lot like a Vaporfly Lite, or even a training companion for it. It's not quite as poppy, but it is a little more comfortable. I would also say if you can get it at China prices, then it's way, way cheaper and offers very good value for money. In conclusion, I think this is a really good shoe. It's the first Chinese shoe I've had where I think it's right up there on a par with the bigger, more established international brands. Sorry, Bmai, but you are getting closer. I picked it over the New Balance RC Elite for my recent 5k and half marathon time trials, not because I wanted to test it out, but because I honestly thought it was going to be the fastest shoe in my current rotation over those distances. And it didn't let me down, which I think speaks volumes. For 5k up to 21.1, I really don't think you can go too far wrong with this shoe, and I think it would make a great long run shoe too, for those who want something lighter and with less upper padding. Putting on my teacher hat, I'm giving this one an A grade. And for the price, if you can get it anywhere near what it costs in China, I think it is an absolute bargain. Shanzhai marketing aside, I'm starting to think that Qiaodan deserves more attention than it gets based on my experiences in this shoe. So that's my review of the Qiaodan Feiying 4.0 PB. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it interesting. I'm still pretty new to all this, so if you did enjoy the video, please give it a like and maybe even a subscribe. Yada, yada, yada. And I hope I see you next time out.